past me, big head. Oi, don't walk past me. Get here. Get your big head on the camera. Come on.
Everybody knows about his amazing record and his opinions on everything inside and outside the game. But you'll learn plenty now about the private side of Brian Clough, a story he's not told before. It's a story which begins at 17 Valley Road in Middlesbrough, where he was born, one of a large family. A humble but happy beginning, leading to a sumptuous lifestyle in Derbyshire that would be the envy of most of us. He's been called plenty of things in his time. He frequently calls himself Big Head.
Well, I think on occasions I have been Big Head. It's as simple as that. I think most people are when they get in either into the limelight or all that type of thing. I think I call myself Big Head just to remind myself not to be. One of the things I laugh about is, and have laughed about over the years, when I used to have to go for interviews for jobs, you know, before I got on. And they were asking me questions and they'd got no idea about football. Now, how can you ascertain if somebody knows something about something if you know bugger all yourself? I think socialism comes from the heart. I think I've been lucky and I've got what I've got. I've made a few bob, I've had a car, I've got a nice house, and I don't see any reason why everybody shouldn't have that. People who I've met sometimes with a few bob and who've got on don't think everybody else should have a few bob and get on. And I think the opposite. I think everybody can have it. And that's where socialism comes from. I think everybody should have a book. I think everybody should have a nice classroom to go to. I think everybody should have the same opportunities. And I brought my children up to think the same. I brought my children up not to be greedy. My children are generous children. And they're generous not with money or that type of thing, although they do that little bit themselves. They're generous giving themselves to people. They're generous with their smiles, they're generous with their time, and that type of thing. The manager's office on a Monday morning, a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and particularly on a Sunday morning when you've lost, is a very lonely place. You won't believe it when we play in front of thousands, but it's an extremely lonely job. And it is when you haven't got anybody to talk to say, well, do you think I've done the right thing? Or shall I do that? And all that type of thing. Lonely job. The dizzy buggers I work with now, they don't know what I mean about closing ranks. They're that bloody flipperty and young, and they've got more money in 2 years than I had in 25 years. But that's the way of the world, and it's called progress. And there's nothing the matter with it, actually. I'm pleased for them. They're nice with it. We've survived. It's the name of the game. Every time people say, how are you? I say, I'm surviving. And they laugh. They think I'm trying to be funny, and I'm not. I said to Terry Venables, 6 months ago, shouted across the dugout, how are you? He says, how are you? I said, I'm surviving. And he laughed. And he thought I was kidding. And I wasn't. I just survived. All been well. That is a compliment when they talk about that. If they come out with that phrase, anybody, that's a compliment. That is the fact that we play the game as most people think it should be played. That is on the floor to feet, quick, neat, decisive, clean, and everything that's good about the game. We portray it. Referees give lectures on the way we behave. Jim Smith, manager of Newcastle, said every time he gets down and depressed and loses a match, he said, I send for a video of Forest. That's how the game should be played.
But at Valley Road in Middlesbrough is where it all began. He was born here, and even though times were hard, life was never dull in the large Clough household. He had parents who instilled a discipline and a love of home life that we see in so much of him today. And as Brian points out, it was certainly a close-knit Clough family.
5 brothers and 2 sisters. Yeah, all in there. And the warmest I've ever been in bed was when we used to sleep 3 in a bed. There was me, our Bill, and our Gerald, 3 in the bed. And gradually, as they all left, you then got 2 in a bed and 1 in a bed. We were never cold. Never ever cold.
The Clough family. That's Brian on the left there. The brothers were highly competitive when it came to football, with plenty of debate as to who was the best among them.
I wasn't the best footballer in the family, and I certainly wasn't anywhere near a so-called star. I never got picked for any form of, it used to be the North Riding in those days, and the South Riding and all that type of thing. I never got picked for any single solitary side. I was a very small child, and I didn't grow until I grew between 16 and 19, and I got to 5'11". The head was the same size, I think, in those days, so our Joe tells me, but I wasn't aware of that. But no selection at all for any side. I struggled to get in the school side in Martin Grove, but I was a fanatic, and we all played. 5 of us all played in the same side, actually, 5, my brothers and I. But that was a level of achievements.
And were you the best of the Clough family?
Football-wise,
Yeah.
I thought I was.
Yeah. Did the rest of the family think you were?
No, there was always opinion.
But when he'd progressed as a Middlesbrough player, he met and married Barbara. It's been a happy marriage, and they've now 3 children of their own.
When I worked at Middlesbrough Football Club as a player, I used to walk through Albert Park, and there was the Ria's Cafe at the corner of Ayrsham Street, where we used to go for a milkshake after training, or an ice cream, or whatever we could afford. But mainly we just used to sit there because we had nought. And I met Barbara in Ria's Cafe, and it was the best thing I ever did in my life. Oh, wasn't I lucky?
His scoring exploits as a Middlesbrough striker made him a folk hero up there. Ayrsham Park certainly has a special place in Cloughie's heart.
This is where it all began, player-wise and every single aspect of life. So many happy memories on this pitch, it would take me hours to even tell you. But a few goals went in the net behind me and more went in that end.
So the lad who struggled to get into his school side and wasn't chosen for any other team had made it. But who first spotted his potential?
Actually, George Camsell was the one who signed me, and he was a very famous centre-forward. And alongside Hughie Gallagher, all names long before you were born and all that type of thing, was reputed to be the bravest centre-half or centre-forward in the whole Football League. And he signed me just before I started my national service. And for that privilege, of course, signing up Middlesbrough before I did my national service, I was retained on £1 a week, which was a lot of money for me because I was getting £2.10 at the ICI, where I graduated from a messenger boy to a worse messenger boy. But I've got to thank George Camsell, obviously, for getting me on phones for Middlesbrough.
And it was a phenomenal time for you here, wasn't it? 213 games, 197 goals.
Thank you. Goals were brought up on goals at this club and brought up on great players. And the Wilfmanians and the George Hardwicks and the Mickey Fentons and the Camsells graced this ground for many, many years. And of course, highly talented players. So when I came along and was scoring goals, it was just norm.
But in spite of all those goals, England recognition was a long time coming. And even then, Brian won only 2 caps for his country. What does he remember about them?
Well, out of 290 minutes, not a lot, obviously, as Eric Morecambe used to say, not a lot. I played with Eddie Holliday.
He was also a Middlesbrough,
yes,
outside left.
Yes, he came from Barnsley. He forgot his boots. Played with James Greaves, who I'm not sure if he's married to the same woman now, but I think he is. She was about 7 months pregnant, and that was funny in those days because up here we didn't get anywhere near a woman. And Jimmy had got his missus pregnant. She turned up, and it was pouring down that particular day at Cardiff, and my mum looked after her because she was like, we used to call them strangled rats when you got wet and no coats and all that type of thing. And then I played at Wembley, of course, and we lost to Sweden. And I can remember hitting a bar and not scoring a goal and getting kicked out and all that type of thing. That was my England career.
When you came towards the end of your Middlesbrough career here, there were thoughts then moving on to Sunderland. But before that happened, rumour has it that you were captain of Middlesbrough then.
Yes.
And did the players not say, we did not want you as captain?
Yes, there was all that type of trouble.
What happened? Why was that?
I'm not sure. Obviously, it was because I was unpopular. But there was various things going on within the club, and they just turned around and said, we don't want you as captain. It's as simple as that.
Really? Why would you have been unpopular, Brian?
I used to think, first of all, I used to think I was a better player than I was, but I used to think also that we scored 97 goals one year and finished 5th. 97 bloody goals now, and we finished 5th. And I thought, well, we'll only score 89 next year, but we'll stop conceding about 50, and we might get promotion. I was unpopular with centre halves and wing halves, as we used to call them in those days.
In other words, you used to give your defence a bit of stick.
They used to fly around, yes, just the same as it does now, no difference.
Yes. Yes.
All great sides are built on clean sheets. All great sides. You can only deliver 8 goals like the Liverpools of this world score from a solid background. You can only deliver life from a solid background, never mind football. You've got to have a few ties, you've got to have something concrete behind you to launch yourself into things. It's the same in football.
So eventually then you decided that you would leave Middlesbrough. How did that come about? I mean, leaving your hometown to go just up the road to Sunderland?
I know, that actually, it took the Middlesbrough people a long time to forgive me for that, because Middlesbrough was like Everton, Liverpool, Middlesbrough and Sunderland, Newcastle. It took them a long time to forgive me going to Sunderland. And for a couple of years it was a case of we wouldn't care where you'd gone by as long as you hadn't gone to Sunderland.
You continued scoring goals at a phenomenal rate there as well until you had this injury.
Happy days at Sunderland.
Yeah.
Happiest time of my life in terms of football wise, because my 2 sons were born in Sunderland and my daughter was born in Hartlepool. So over a period of 3 years it was the happiest time of my life. And Sunderland people are beautiful.
And at Roker Park still the goals kept coming. Here a fabulous header. Brian played for them from 1961 to 1964, and indeed he scored 54 goals in 61 games. That's a truly remarkable tally.
Clough with a chance. Yes, it's there! A brilliant piece of opportunism by Brian Clough. Clough! Yes, it's there, my word. Chip. Clough's there, it's in! Oh, what a delightful header.
Boxing Day '62 was a very unhappy time for me, obviously, because we were playing against Bury that particular day, and I'd got my head down going into the penalty area, chasing a bad ball from Jimmy McNabb, and a goalkeeper came out rather balmy in those days, because they didn't come out quickly in those days, and they weren't as brave as present-day goalkeepers. Anyway, I went over him and I did my knee and I did my big head and all that type of thing, and I finished up in the infirmary in Sunderland. And that finished me altogether.
Yeah, I mean, you struggled on, I think, to play, 2 or 3 games at the start of the following season?
I trained for about 12 months, 18 months and tried to get back, and I eventually made it to the First Division. It was the only time I ever played in the First Division. And one of the nice things of having got back, not only got back on the football field, because that was the only thing I could do, was play football, was I scored against Leeds. And over the years, they became the arch enemies of everybody, never mind just me. And I scored against Jackie Charlton, which I used to do regularly, actually, because in those days he couldn't play.
Really?
He only became a player when he was about 26, 27.
Yes. And now you're at which age now are we talking about?
Well, my age, I was 27, 28, and I finished when I was 29. And the vivid things that come back when you bring things back to me big head was, of course, you get carried off because you've done your knee and all that type of thing, and I'm lying there at Roker Park, and the physiotherapist went to take my boots off, and Alan Brown says, "Don't touch his boots, leave his boots on." And I just got my big head up, and I said, "What?" He said, "Well, you might just go back on." And that's how we used to think and talk. But unfortunately for me, I didn't get back on.
So the injury eventually finished his playing career. Next stop was Hartlepool's, then languishing near the foot of the 4th Division, his first managerial appointment. And facing the cameras, the style is certainly familiar.
Mind you, the things that are hard work to other managers are not hard work to me. The discipline side of it and the judging of players, the training, the coaching, these are not problems as far as I'm concerned. In the North East you have this fear of not having a job. And momentarily, between playing and going into management, I was resting. And I had this fear of being unemployed and all that type of thing, and can't do very much else apart from work in football. So having got the Hartlepool job, I was absolutely delighted and thrilled.
Yes. And that's to the point your relationship with Peter Taylor first really began to blossom, wasn't it?
Managerial-wise, yes. I'd known Taylor at Middlesbrough, obviously, as players, yes. But he was manager of Burton Albion when I took over the job at Hartlepool. And his ambition was to get into league management a little bit more than mine was. Yes. Because I anticipated playing 2 or 3, 4 years more, but he was obsessive about getting into league management. And I rang him and I said, I'm taking the Hartlepool job, do you fancy coming? And I met him at the Chase Hotel at York and didn't actually talk him into joining, just showed him some pound notes. 200 actually.
The chairman at Hartlepool's was Ernie Ord, and for the first time, but by no means the last, Brian had a disagreement with the board.
That was normal procedure, that disagreement in boardrooms. It's been the story of my life. He sacked me actually, Ernie Ord. He was chairman. He sacked me at Hartlepool's, and I'd got a friend called Mr. Crosby on the board also, and I said, well, you needn't sack me because I'm not going anywhere. And I stuck it out for 48 hours, and apart from a mad moment at Derby when I walked out when I was full of myself and resigned, I've stuck by the principle. Even when they sack you, don't go anywhere. Let the bastards go first.
So what happened then? I mean, you stuck it out for 48 hours.
48 hours, and then we had a board meeting, and then Mr. Ord resigned.
So Clough had beaten the system, but his days at Hartlepool's were successful and numbered. He'd taken the club to the upper reaches of the 4th Division, that was their best position for 10 years, and now Clough and Taylor had attracted Derby County. Peter Taylor was offered the Hartlepool's job, but he decided to go to Derby with Brian.
I've got my mind set on football. I know how I approach it, etc., etc. Make no difference whether it's Derby County or whether it's Liverpool.
I came 18 months ago from Burton Albion to be with Brian Clough. Brian Clough, the man I know, and I intend to stay with Brian Clough. He's fulfilled all I thought of him when I came from Burton, and I intend to go with Brian Clough to the top of the tree, and that we'll start at Derby.
But it was unique in the sense that it was manager and assistant manager, and directors had thought for 20, 30, 40 years that it was a one-man job. We discovered early doors that it was a two-man job, and of course now it's been copied for the last 20 or 30 years.
Yes, and the chemistry was good.
It was absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was that good at his job in those days, Taylor. He used to see things 24 hours before I did.
Really?
Regarding players, and his renowned ability for signing players, i.e. the Archie Gamels and all that type of thing, is second to none. His message to me, because he never used to attend matches, I'm not sure if he used to attend the matches he was going to see the players, but anyway, that's by and by. But he went to see Archie Gamel, who was playing for Preston, just to give you an offhanded example, and he phoned in at 5:30 and he says, get in your car and come and sign Archie Gamel. He's that good. Now nobody can be more positive than that, and then I had to go and do all the work obviously of trying to get and buy and all that type of thing, but he'd done the initial work. And just to throw names away, when I was talking to Sinatra, he said the written word is the first one. The music comes later. And in football, the one who picks a player comes first. All the bullshit comes later.
Well, one man who was picked out early by Derby County was Dave Mackay, signed from Spurs, magnificent leader, inspirational player, and the cornerstone of Derby's climb to glittering success.
Dave was the best. He cornerstone is a underestimation of David Mackay's influence at Derby County. He was the Derby County, and he was the Championship, Second Division and Championship, First Division eventually, European Cup days and all sorts. Dave was a competitor at every level and lost his temper when he lost and lost his temper with his colleagues. But they were all impressionable young men, as I was, and we were all standing back in awe of David. And not only was he playing and winning matches and championships for us, he didn't know, but he was doing my job as well. But I soon twigged he was doing my job, so I was very grateful. And eventually he played sweeper, but he was used to covering every blade of the grass on a football pitch, as you well know, and that was his image. And he couldn't visualise just sitting at the back and using the vast experience and the enormous talent that he had. But he didn't know he had it till he played there. It's like most of us, you know, it's brought out on certain occasions, and David Mackay was certainly the best player in the Football League at that time. And he was better than Bobby Moore, who was playing for England, who I tried to sign afterwards, when David had finished, or during the same time or whatever. He was better than Bobby Moore, and Bobby finished up with 105 caps and wrote a bad book. He shouldn't have told them I tapped him up.
You didn't?
I did. It was at the Churchill Hotel in London, but he shouldn't have told anybody. What I did was I won the Second Division at Derby, and I got promotion at Nottingham Forest out the Second Division. They were as vivid, and are still to this day, than the European jobs and the First Division championships and all sorts. It just depends what makes you tick and what turns you on and all that type of thing. But that was the first sign of success at two clubs, at Derby and Nottingham Forest, getting out the Second Division. And they gave me more pleasure than everything else.
But Derby also won the league championship, and glorious nights in the European Cup were to follow.
Hinton. And it's Hinton going to take the corner. Not a short one this time, but again aimed towards McFarland. Hector, yes! McFarland. Daniel. Loose, McGovern.
Skillful players, canny management. Indeed, hours before that Benfica game, Clough had ordered that the pitch should be very heavily watered. Why?
I didn't want the Portuguese coming, fancy dans as they were, but talented players. I didn't want them coming portraying too much of the talent. So we bogged them down and absolutely, to use, walked all over them. Or used the water and pissed all over them.
Juventus, you didn't walk all over them though.
They beat us 3-1 there, and they bought the German referee. He was from West Germany actually, and they bought him. And then we got a non at our place and got knocked out the semi-final of the European Cup. We genuinely thought we could win it.
I mean, you genuinely felt, I mean, you've said that at the time and you're saying it again now, that they bought the referee.
The Times newspaper used to run a column, or whatever it was called Insight in those days. I don't know whether it still does now, since, do they still do it now, Insight? Well, Murdoch will have absolutely murdered the column, because he owns the bloody Times, doesn't he? What a tragedy that people like him can own our Times. And they had a thing called Insight, and they did a very, very profound, factual thing into the buying of the referees. And the one who blew it was the guy who was refereeing the match at Derby, and he was a Portuguese referee, and they offered him 5,000 quid. And he blew the whole thing. And FIFA, all these powerful bodies who are now stopping us going into Europe and all that, didn't do that much. And it was proved absolutely conclusively that the West German referee was bought. We took off, as I said earlier, and obviously everybody came in on the act, so to speak. I used to go out in my waistcoat, and in those days I was like a ninepenny rabbit. And people hadn't or weren't used to football managers talking and that type of thing, and I got involved with you lot.
So the prominence of Derby, they'd already won the league championship, as we know, and now it seemed the sky was the limit for Cloughie.
I think I would like the supreme job of dictating football. That's a supreme job, and I mean dictating football. I mean right down to the school level, right down to the coaching level, and saying this is how I believe it should be done. I don't think we have too many experts running our game. I think the people within the game run it, and I think this is wrong. I think if you've got a financial wizard outside, he should be brought in to run the financial affairs of the Football League, or at least his advice should be sought. And I would pay an awful lot of money to people whose job it is to look after finance to do just that. The FA have got a file on Derby County, I'm certain, of the fines the players have had to take from me for doing things that shouldn't have been done. I wish everybody was fined for doing naughty things in football.
Opinions, opinions. And another famous one was that the Polish goalkeeper Tomaszewski, now to face England in a vital World Cup qualifier, was a clown.
Well, I called him the clown at Wembley when we were doing the live Poland v England match, and we got knocked out of the World Cup qualifying matches, and I stuck by it, obviously, and had to stick by it when I met him 2 or 3, 4 years later, because whether he was a clown or whether he wasn't, he was big, but he knocked us out of the World Cup, and how he kept shots out of his goal that particular night, and how we didn't win 6 or 7-1, I will never ever know to this day. I do know, because that's football. And I commiserated with, I took the trouble to leave the gantry where I was working with you, and I walked across the Wembley pitch and went into the dressing room, and it was only the second or third time, and said to Alf, who I think regarded me as not one of his best friends in those days, Alf Ramsey, and I said, for what it's worth, I said, you must be the unluckiest guy in football at this present time. I said, because you could have done that lot 7. And he said, thanks very much, and out I walked.
Well, he took plenty of criticism for that Tomaszewski remark, but that didn't stop him, even if other people in the game now began to call him arrogant.
Arrogant perhaps is a fair word, and conceited certainly. I'm conceited in respect of having got a side like Derby from where we were, certainly, and worked bloody hard for 4 years and got them to where we are now. Now, I know I've not won a championship or anything like that, but you know, if Malcolm Allison and Don Revie are not proud, conceited, call it what you like about their achievements, I think there's something the matter with them. I think conceit and arrogance is part of a man's makeup. Perhaps I've got too much. Outspoken, I don't know. I'm still working.
Well, I think
you
gave yourself the name of the big head, didn't you? I mean, you
only
quite,
now I give
yeah,
it.
Yeah,
only now, but it came, obviously.
But
I was good fodder for you lot down there, and good fodder for the London scene. And Barbara, as she says, she said, I think you talked yourself out the England manager's job. And I think she could be right.
Did you also possibly talk yourself in the end out of the Derby County job? Because I think Sam Longson, the chairman at this time, was getting a little worried about your exposure on TV. There was even talk then that he maybe want to vet the things you were saying and writing.
Sam switched. Sam wanted me to project Derby County Football Club in the early days, and he wanted to meet you, and he wanted to meet Bobby Moore, and he wanted to something, and he wanted to do all the things that every chairman wants to do. But once having done them, he then said, well, I think we better get respectable now, after about 5 or 6 years. And where he'd been shoving me down on the motorway to go on television, and actually at a board meeting it was minuted where he actively encouraged me to take jobs on television. It switched over a period of 3 or 4 years. And he felt then I was devoting too much time and all that type of thing. But that's the way it goes. He brought a rule out when I first worked there, because he was the first guy who took me to Derby County, and he felt that directors, having got to 65, should be finished with the club and resign from the board and all that type of thing. And he got a minute through to that effect. But of course, when the old bastard got to 65 himself, he changed it. Now, when the rules don't suit him, and when they're in power, they change the rules. Now, they cheat more than you and I. You don't cheat. I've bent a few in my time. But they change the rules when it doesn't suit them.
I think, in spite of it all, except maybe right at the you still had a very good relationship with him. It was almost, he used to say, like a father-son relationship, wasn't it?
Well, it was absolutely incredible. He'd got 3 daughters, and they were Quakers. He'd brought them up in the Quaker school at Darlington with 3 daughters, and I think deep down somewhere along the line he did want a son. I came into his life, and I had 3 2 sons and a daughter, and what appeared to be a nice family. And we went for 4, 5, 6 years like a house on fire. Absolutely like a house. It couldn't have been kinder if it had been my own dad.
Why did it finish then?
Well, I said he wanted then to calm down, and he then wanted to. He actually tried to get on the league management committee. For his bloody sins, he tried to get among that lot. So he wanted to go into that area of league and football management, or whatever you call it. And I think he wanted to sit near Len Shipman, who was the league president in those days, dear old Len, who was a good friend of mine, a good friend. And I think he looked at the Football Association, and he'd had a taste of the Royal Box. Of course, that throws the bloody lot of them, you know. You know, when they get a taste of that, they love it, you know. And they sit there and they think, well, now, you know, I could do with this for the next 5 years. But they don't realise, they forget what it costs to get there, hard work and a bit of sweat and a few swear words and whatever.
So what you're saying is that the break-up at Derby, in fact, was all over the TV appearances?
No, not all over the TV appearances, but little other things and all that type of thing. And Taylor was, actually, we were at Old Trafford, the last match before I resigned, and we beat Manchester United 1-0 at Old Trafford, and I went 2nd or 3rd in the First Division. Now, that wasn't a position where you resign from. And I'd just signed, about 6 weeks previous, a 4-year contract. And Mr. Longston had given me 21,000 quid a year, which, by your standards, not a lot of cash, but by my standards in those days, a fortune. And I got myself a £90,000 contract, and I was still full of myself, and I thought, well, I can see the 4 years out, I'll get my house paid for and all that type of thing, and the future looked rosy. But things did sour, and a guy came on the board who wanted Taylor to account for what he was doing. And it blew up at Old Trafford, actually. Really? And it was a bloke called Jack Kirkland, and he gave Taylor, you could, in football we take anything, as you well know. We take the lot, like coppers do. They have to, it's the job to take all that. And in turn, sometimes you have to take the rough end. And across the boardroom, or the lounge, or whatever it is at Old Trafford, the director did that to Taylor with his bloody finger. Now, I'm telling you, nobody had done that to us since I was at school. And it's like calling somebody sir, you know. They get sir if they deserve sir, but sir, I'll give him sir. And he's giving it that, wiggling his finger, and I want to see you on Monday morning. And of course Taylor came down into the dressing room and absolutely was inconsolable. And he said, I've gone through, we're not going through all that. So that was the very last thing that sparked it off. So I went to a hastily convened board meeting that particular week, and I says, you can stick your contract right up your jacksie. I'm off, and it went from there.
But that simply started a series of protests through the streets of Derby. The fans wanted the board out and Clough and Taylor to remain. And from all accounts, the players felt much the same way.
They went on strike, poor lads. They went on strike, and
I mean, that was never going to succeed, was it?
No, it couldn't. We slipped up, actually. We got a plane from East Midlands, and we should have gone. Then we'd have thrown the cat among the pigeons, and a bit of sense prevailed, and we didn't get out on the plane. And
really, you'd actually sort of got it.
Oh yes, we'd got all organised. So
what, to leave Derby?
Well, no, we just to miss the Saturday's match.
Really?
Yes, and we had bags of meetings and bags of friends, but of course sense comes to the surface in most situations. As Barbara often says, it's only men who cause problems. You know, if women ruled the world, there'd be no wars. We'd live in a better world, and so on and so on and so on. And of course the women came and said, hey, just a minute. We've got 2 kids, 1 kid, mortgage up to here. Could it get it all sorted out? And well, that's what happened.
You eventually got it sorted out by going to Brighton.
I took money to go to Brighton. I took money. And that was the wrong reason for going to Brighton. I should have gone to Brighton because I was out of work and it was the job, but the money was an incentive, and that possibly coloured me. But I think if I only stayed there 9 months, And Mike Bamber, who I worked for,
The chairman of Brighton.
yes, was the best chairman I ever worked for. And I've worked for some crackers. He was the best chairman ever. What he put up with while I was at Brighton is nobody's business.
Like what?
Like losing 8-2 at home.
What did you think of Brighton yesterday?
All right.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good.
That's right, busy. You were there doing it all, giving it big licks, bloody loving it. You've shown it 43,000 times. And Mike put up with me. We didn't win every single match we played, and they just won the championship. And I was getting the feedback having a side won a championship. Sometimes, and in fact, actually, I think it's a fact of life. It's harder to hang on to success than to get it. And I found myself having gone to Leeds with 8 contracts to be done. Now, that didn't frighten me, but it entailed a lot of work. And I mentioned it to the local paper. He says, what are you doing? I said, I'm busy doing contracts in the morning. I said, there's about 8 of them. Gilesy was finished, or about finished. I fixed him up to go to assistant manager at Tottenham. He said yes and then refused, having met Bill Nicholson, because Bill wanted to groom him to take over Tottenham. And it was all sorts of things. And it was a 24-hour day job, and a hard job. But that's what they were paying me for.
And they had been very close to Reevy, who, I mean, whatever you feel about him, had managed them superbly, really.
Not much. He was like I was at Derby, one of them.
Yes.
And he'd got it off to a fine art. Everything that was good about the game and everything that was rotten. But when I got the sack, Cousins came to me and said, it's not working out, is it? I said, it's working out fine for me. So just give me a bit of time. And the final crunch was...
So you were happy, you would have been happy to have stayed at Leeds?
Oh, I'd have stuck it out, of course I would. Give over. I just signed, once again, I just signed a 4-year contract. There's no way I was going from Leeds. And he said it isn't working out. And what had pushed them over the cliff, or whatever happens in their particular world, I tried to sign Peter Shilton. And they had a goalkeeper called Harvey, who was reputed to be a good one and that. And I think he kicked up a bit about, I'm not getting replaced with Shilton. They were faced with Shilton for 250,000 quid in those days. That's all it was. And they weren't too happy. And I didn't take the advice of a guy called Collins, who was a nice gentleman and still in the game,
Tony
actually.
Collins.
Tony Collins. And he came to me after about 2, 3, 4 weeks or whatever it was, and said to me, he says, don't try and do it too quickly. He says, you're trying to do it too quickly. And I was. Because I lived by the rule that in the first 3 months of a Football League manager's life, you're at your strongest. Get all the unpleasant stuff out the way. If you've got a bum for a chairman or a guy who's following you around on the board, you might as well just stop him and say, just a minute, you ain't following me anywhere. Get out my way. I've come here to do a job for 3 months, and do all the unpleasant stuff. It's the best way to do it, because you're never stronger as a Football League manager than you are in the first 3 months. Unless you hang around for 15 years, and then, you know.
So I mean, you feel you may have tried to change things too quickly. Yes.
Much too quickly.
Yeah. So came the fateful day. Leeds chairman Manny Cousins told the waiting press that Clough was sacked to keep the players happy. Brian certainly wasn't sorry for himself.
I think it's a very sad day for Leeds. I think it's slightly sad for football.
Why is he going, Mr. Cousins? I mean, there is no answer to that question.
Because we've been spoilt by Don Revie. A new manager coming after 13 or 14 years of success, it is very difficult to follow.
He gave me 25,000 quid. He said, it's not working out, is it? And I was quite prepared to sit it out. And I said, of course it'll work out, man. I said, give it time. And he says, no, he said, all that type of thing. And he finished up giving me 25,000 quid, which was an ex gratia payment in those days. And he gave me a lovely blue Mercedes, which he'd just bought me. And it'd only been delivered about a week, and that was worth about 6,500 quid. I took the cheque down to London, because having got the sack after 44 days, I didn't trust him at all. Anybody who was that shallow and that stupid to sack me after 44 days must be suspect. But he'd signed the cheque personally, but I took it down and got it cleared, instead of going through the normal channels where I'd have had to wait 3 or 4 days. Good came out of that because I came financially secure for the first time in my life, and I always knew I was a good Football League manager. But having got financially secure, then I could really go to town and put it into operation, because that was the fears in those days that kept you down a bit.
Well, even though he was now temporarily out of football, Clough was busy up and down the country making personal and TV appearances. And when he wasn't around, well, a substitute was always on hand.
I'm a professional. I love the game. I'm good at it. I know what I'm doing. You wouldn't be talking to me now if I didn't know what I was doing. I think it's very important to be honest. Very important. Football's a hard game, you know that. And you've got to be honest with people.
There was tons of work, but people were a bit wary. Chairman I'm talking about. And they actually thought that if they employed me, I'm sure they did, and the England selectors thought also that if they took me on as a manager and give me a job, I'd want to run the show. And of course there's somebody shrewd, because that's exactly what I would have done.
Well, Nottingham Forest, to their credit, were not put off. They took on Clough, who was now rejoined by his old partner Peter Taylor. Clough had been on his own at Leeds, and Taylor had been manager of Brighton. But now they were together again, although Peter Taylor needed some persuading to leave the south coast.
Mike Bamber talked him into staying at Brighton, didn't fancy coming up to Leeds, and I think Taylor fancied the Brighton scene a little bit more than I did. But as I've told you, if I'd have stayed at Brighton another year, I don't think Barbara and I would have ever left Brighton. And the attraction for her, of course, was 59 minutes from Brighton straight into Piccadilly Circus or something like that. With her being a theatre lover and all that type of thing, I think she was going to see ballet a couple of times every month instead of a couple of times every year. And somebody joined us in the opera company at, is it Glyndebourne, which it bores the arse off me. But she absolutely loves it. And she wanted that type of life, and she thought it was good for the kids, and she thought it was a good balance, because I like the seaside. I was brought up at the seaside, but it never worked out, and we never got in the house and all that type of thing.
And Peter obviously felt that he might have a go at number one there.
He wanted to stay there. He took some more money. We took money for going to Brighton, and me and Taylor, he took some more for staying. Oh, he's nearly as good at it as I am. And he stayed there. But of course it went a bit sour on him, because he hadn't been in management and for, you know, while working with me, and once he got there in the other seat, it's a different kettle of fish.
But Clough and Taylor took over problems at the City Ground, Nottingham.
Yep, they were bottom of the second division. It was another Hartlepool and another Brighton episode. The jobs I've got were spawned out of desperation. This lot here played in front of 6,000 people the match before I took over against Hull City and got done 2-0. So it was fear that overcame this reluctance to employ me, where I got most of my jobs.
But Clough and Taylor had an immediate impact, and together they took Forest out of the second division and into the first.
We got promotion nearly by fluke, but there's no such thing as getting promotion by fluke, because you play 42 games. One of the worst decisions journalists ever made was when I won the first division at Derby on goal average and didn't get manager of the year, because they said I'd half fluked it just on goal average. Absolute bullshit. Absolute twisted thinking. You can't be lucky over 42 games. One game, yes, 2 games, 5 games, but not 42 games. And it applied when we got promotion here.
By now the top players were being attracted to Nottingham Forest. Peter Shilton was one of them.
And Shilton didn't come till September, having got promotion. And I went to see him at Mansfield, believe it or believe it not, the week before I signed him. And he was playing in front of 4 3/4 people. And he was with Stoke. And I went to Stoke and I said, we'd like to buy Shilton, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. And the chairman of Stoke, and I can't remember his name now, but I could soon find it for you, he said to me, he'll get you the sack. I says, he's not that good to get me the sack. And I says, what do you mean? He said, he's on that much money. And he was built in with something. Anyway, we paid 300,000 quid for him. Not only didn't he get me the sack, he won me a championship.
He won you the championship?
Him and the back four. All good sides are built on back fours and goalkeepers. And he came in September, and we just absolutely, from then on in, steamrolled everybody. We had a firm belief that if we ever scored, we'd win, because there was no way they were going to score. And I worked with Big Ed Lloydie, and I worked with Kenny Burns, and I got Kenny Burns' car. Well, we changed his car because he'd pinched one. And he came from Birmingham, and he'd pinched it, no insurance, no tax. So the first thing I did for him was we got rid of the one he'd pinched, we got him away from Perry Bar Dog Track, because I think he'd got a tent or a chalet there or something, turned him into a player for 2 years. Big Ed Lloydie's career was resurrected from Coventry Reserves. Shilton came, and we went like that. But what was most important is there was 5 or 6 players here who people didn't think could play. But once they got with players who could play, they blossomed. You know, it's like giving them a shovel of, it was like giving John Robertson a shovel of manure. Nobody knew it, but suddenly you give him a shovel full of manure, and a beautiful flower came up. And John Robertson and Martin O'Neill and Tony Woodcock and Viv Anderson. Viv was working with me in those days, and Viv was like something the cat had brought in. And, as my mother used to say, like an empty rabbit. He hadn't got the bloody strength to put his boots on. But he was only 19, 20, and they all blossomed at the same time. And we took off. And then we took everybody on as well. And a good, close-knit side. Not as good as a Derby side, and not as close-knit because we were more experienced then, and a little bit more cynical, but still very close. Gemmell used to get me off the floor occasionally when I'd lost, and he used to say, what are we going to do? He says, we'll close ranks. The instant bloody coffee that came on the mark, because he was the instant man on the football field. He could turn a game just like that. One cross, one goal, one flick, all over and done with. He did it in East Germany when I'd lost down here 1-0 to the East Germans, and he stuck 2 in over there, and the game was over. We'd won, and then we went on to win the European Cup. And of course, the first kick he ever got for us in the European football, he stuck his big head on across from John Robertson, which our Elizabeth could have put in, but he got all the glory. It's like everything else. When I say how Elizabeth could have put it in, that's a flippant remark, because scoring goals has always been the hardest thing in football, and still is to this day. It always has been and always will be. In any match you go to, you'll see a goal miss from a yard, a foot, 3 yards, 6 yards, 10 metres or whatever. It's the hardest thing in football. Get somebody to be able to score a goal, you've got yourself a player.
Well, the man you've mentioned, John Robertson, scored a goal that won you the European Cup final
Sure
the following year.
Sure did.
Against Hamburg in Madrid.
Scored it with his right foot. It's so daft, football, and it's so a thin dividing line, success and failure and all that type of thing. John Robertson, hell, he never even looked at his right foot when he put his shoe on, because he was so predominantly left foot, it was frightening. But eventually he developed, and then he stuck this one in with his right foot. He's a type of player, I once described him to you, or tried to, and I wasn't very good at it, that he was a very unattractive young man, and if ever I felt off colour on a morning, I used to sit next to him. Because having bloody sat next to him, I felt great. And I've never been an oil painter myself, but when I wanted to shave and all that type of thing, I used to sit next to John, because I was bloody Errol Flynn compared to him. And he was a fat little dumpy little lad, and still is to this day.
Can I bring you now onto something that you've never spoken about, but it is an important part of your life, and we're talking about your lifestyle and so on. And that is now the breakup with Peter Taylor, because it happened around about this time, didn't it? After
Taylor retired.
Retired.
We got done here by Manchester United, actually. We left Derby having won at Old Trafford.
Yes.
And it's funny how it all comes round. If you stay around long enough, everything comes round again. Yes. But we got done here by Manchester United 1-0. And Taylor used to use a phrase called, "We've shot it." And he came in having been beaten, and we were on the floor, and we were having a particularly bad month, result-wise. And he came and he said, "We've shot it, haven't we?" I says, "No." I said, "You have." And he said, you're right. And I says, retire. And he retired. And I fixed up his financial things there and then. Geoffrey Macpherson was chairman in those days, and I got him out of the boardroom. I said, Peter's retiring. I said, let's start everything in motion now. And I got his cheque and I got his card, the rules that I'd been taught, and he came into the ground the following day and picked his cheque up and retired. And then, of course, like a lot of daft people who retire, got itchy feet and thought, well, what have I retired for? And didn't find retirement what they thought it was going to be and all that type of thing. And then gave me a ring and says, let's go back to Derby. I says, no. I said, I am happy where I am.
Why do you think he thought you'd shot it, or that
Well,
you as a pair had
I
shot
think
it?
the particular match had got him down. We'd been knocked out of Europe early doors, and things weren't going well that particular month, you know, and he was 6 or 7 or 8 years older, and it just took him on at that particular time, and he felt he'd done his bit.
The feeling that people have, Brian, if I can just press you on this, is that there's still a great deal of animosity between you. That it was an unpleasant breakup.
It was no. That didn't come. He eventually decided to go to Derby County as manager.
Yes.
And I was earning wheelchairs for the disabled a few years ago, and I did what was called the Centurion Walk, which is 100 miles around the Yorkshire Dales. Beautiful. I can recommend it for anybody. And like most people, I was ringing back every 3 or 4 days, and I rang Barbara on a Saturday night, and I said, we've just done another 15 miles today, da-di-da-di-da-di-da, and she said, well, you don't know what's happened, do you? I said, yeah. She said, what's happened? I said, Taylor's son, John Robertson. And she said, you must know. And I said, well, I didn't know. I said, but I got a smell of it before I left on the walk, and the bust-up came with Taylor because he didn't have the good manners or the courtesy, having known me for 20-odd years, or 30-odd years nearly, to give me a ring and saying, I'm signing John Robertson. Because John was at the end of his contract. And since then, I've not spoken to the guy since. It's 8 years ago, or whatever, 8, 9 years ago. So there was no bust-up here.
Was that the failing to give you the courtesy of that call?
That was it. Just one call. 2 lines in a letter. One call. 30-second phone call. Just say, by the way, I'm signing John Robertson. Are you all right? How's the walk going? Ta-ra. Get back in bed. You know the normal procedure.
Does that not sadden you? I mean, because you had such terrific times together, didn't you? That it's ended that way.
It saddened me in the sense that afterwards, after he got the sack at Derby, things didn't go well for him at Derby, and he got the sack. And he did periodically articles for bits and bobs and all that type of thing. And he came out with one line in one article, and he was absolutely smack on. He said, I don't know what he's doing. This is me he was talking about. I don't know where he is. I don't know how much money he's making. I don't know how many games he's won since I left. He said, but I do know one thing for certain. He's not laughing as much.
Is that true?
Yes. He used to make me laugh. And in our business, if you don't laugh, you cry. Like in your business.
About this time, England were looking for a manager to succeed Don Revie. Cloughie, the people's choice, was on the shortlist at the Football Association.
I got interviewed at Lancaster Gate for the England team manager's job by a bloke called Thompson. And I'm telling you...
Sir Harold Thompson?
Yes. And I think he was a professor in history or somebody, stuff like that. That put me off him for a start, because I was never any good at history. And that girl back there, who we're working with now, or one of the lads we're working with, knew more about football than him. And he was interviewing me for the England team manager's job. And I took it as a bit of an insult. This is when Greenwood actually got the job. Yes. We all failed the interview, and they give it somebody to just get everybody off their bloody backs for 6 months. That's
tell me how the interview went. And what happened? You went
I did a good interview. I went and thought, actually, having come out, I thought I'd got a job. And eventually they gave me the U-team job, in charge of the England youth side.
Why did you think you had a good interview? What did they ask you, and what did you say, Brian?
They talked about, we tried to, I told you about Thompson, but Sir Matt Busby talked to me, who was obviously, and still is, the pinnacle of football in most people's minds, a lot of people's minds. He talked to me football-wise, and that went well.
Thompson didn't say a lot, but didn't seem anti. But I underestimated him.
Yes.
I underestimated him. He was anti, but didn't show it. Swales was there, the chairman of Manchester City, who had portrayed in the weeks previous that he was a friend of mine. And so it went on, and the secretary was there.
Ted Croker.
I upset Ted because he'd stuck me in his office before I went in for the interview. And like most people were stuck in offices, I was looking at all the pictures on the walls, which is the most natural thing in the world to do. And I saw the England teams of old in white shirts. And in those days, England, when I went for the interview, were wearing a hideous strip by a firm called Admiral. And the first thing I went in when I said the interview, I said, Ted, I said, you want to get back to the white shirts? Why, Brian? I said, because white is good for England. And it's good for us. And I've been looking at the photographs in your office and all that. Oh, we've got to move with the times. I said, bullshit. I says, if you've got a Rolls Royce is a Rolls Royce. A white shirt for England is a white shirt. Move with the times? Absolute rubbish. So he upset him the second I walked in. But the interview went well in general, and I was happy. You know when, you particularly in your industry, you know when you've done something good or whatever. And you come out and you've got a nice feeling and you think, well, I've not upset anybody, I've not sworn too much, and I've done a good interview, my credentials are there. Most people, when they go for interviews, as you well know, have to take folders and put on the table their credentials. I don't think I had this on, but there's something similar. I went. But if they'd wanted, I'd have thrown me medals on the table. There was enough of them around. I could have shown some of the people, the selectors, medals that they'd never ever seen. And the clubs that they were involved with had never ever seen, and never seen since. I could have stuck my European medals on, I could have stuck my England cap on too. I could have put my Littlewoods thing on, I could have put this on, that on, you name it, I'd have put it on. I won the Texaco Cup the first year it was installed. I'd have stuck that medal on as well. They're my A-levels.
How did they tell you that you hadn't got it?
And that's what I say to my children.
Yes.
When my children take the mickey out of me and then they say, you don't do this, Dad, and you can't do this, Dad, and you can't do that, Dad. No O-levels, no A-levels. I said, just a minute. If you want my case from upstairs, I'll put my O-levels and A-levels on the table. They wrote me a letter and said, thank you very much for the interview, and we've given you the youth team manager's job.
I mean, that rankled with you for quite a while, didn't it? I think maybe still does at the back of your mind that you didn't have a crack at the England job.
Well, what they did was they didn't make a decision. Didn't give it me, didn't give it Laurie, didn't give it Jack Charlton. Charlie Hughes had the audacity to actually apply for the job. Charlie Hughes, and he's the assistant director of coaching. Now I'm telling you, that's like Barbara applying for my job here. Charlie Hughes applying for the England job. And he was on the shortlist. That's how wrong in their thinking they were. So they quietened everything down and gave Ron Greenwood it, which actually wasn't too bad a choice because he'd got immense knowledge of the game and he fit the image and fit everything and was well liked within the game.
Yes.
In the latter years of his management, I started to listen to more of what he was talking about that I had in the early days. And he came across quite well. From being so-called competitors and enemies, we didn't get close, but close enough to respect each other.
Yes. Would you have made a good England manager, successful?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think you might?
I might have lasted less than 44 days.
I mean, it's a very
I'd
individual...
have changed it. We'd
Yeah.
have gone into white shirts. Teeny little things. I could never understand, and I told Bobby Robson now, the present England team manager, how he can have professional footballers having played on a Saturday with the demanding programmes we have in our country, go down to a London hotel on a Saturday night or a Sunday night and prepare for a match that's not being played till a Wednesday is beyond my comprehension.
What would you do?
They should be with their girlfriends, wives and kids on a Saturday and a Sunday getting ready for the Wednesday. Now what he does, he puts them in a lovely plush hotel or at Bisham Abbey or whatever he puts them,
and they finish up in dog tracks, pubs, trouble, bloody phone bills, kicking the heels, you name it, everything wrong in preparation. And I've told him it and he still does it. So, you know.
So you'd have changed a few things like that? You'd have changed a few,
thing.
yeah.
I never believed in training camps as such for 14 days and preparation for that type of thing. Preparation is relaxation. I'll tell you the first one who taught me it, and I didn't twig it till many years afterwards. When I was involved playing-wise with England, a guy called Walter Winterbottom was in charge, and they gave him a knighthood now. Once again, a charming man. As good a judge of centre forwards as I was with Fashnew, Wallace and Ward. None of them could play, and he couldn't judge me because I could play. So he was as good as judge as me. Absolute bloody rubbish he was.
In the midst of all the success, the one trophy that's eluded him is the FA Cup, and he's constantly reminded of that. But is it something that rankles with him?
It didn't affect me that much. I think it affected people more than it affected me, or other people more than it affected me, you know. And they want to win it for me more than I particularly want to win it. I just want to win anything, me. I don't care whether it's the FA Cup, Littlewoods Cup, Football League, Championships or anything. It doesn't bother me what you win, as long as you win something, and at the end of the day you see a reward for your year's work. Same dressing rooms, same pitch, same guys looking at you. They never change, do they? The FA people and the Football League, they're there. Same seats, same commentator. You've done well as well, you bugger. And it was smashing to go. And of course, in the past, I've taken my boy, my two sons, I've taken them as spectators, and they've sat on benches with me all over the world. But he was actually on the pitch this time. And one of the last times he was on Wembley was when I'd been working for your company, and I'd taken him down to a match, and he was taking some penalties against me at the end of a match, when everybody had gone. And the groundsman bellowed across and shouted, "Get off that pitch, you!" And I've never been, you know, I didn't go on a pitch for years after that until you caught me clipping some lads.
That must have been something, actually, to watch your son win a cup final at Wembley.
It was good afterwards, because obviously we're a small little family, and we all got home various ways. I came back on the coach with him. I stuck the cup on top of the television, and we knew we'd got it videoed and all that type of thing. And he's sitting talking to his girlfriend in the same lounge. My other son's there, my daughter's there, and then to see him stick one in, it was a very pleasant feeling.
Yes. I mean, you are the most unpredictable of men. And on that particular occasion, you went off to the dressing room and you actually didn't see him receive his winner's medal, did you?
No, that backfired on me,
I couldn't understand why you did that.
It backfired because I wanted to get out of sight of everybody, and because I didn't win the cup, they won it. Yeah. And then, of course, it backfired in the sense that I appeared to capture 15 seconds or 30 seconds and all that type of thing. He got tied up getting the Man of the Match award and messed all the photographers up and nearly lost his big head on the official photograph. But anyway, it all worked out well. I got in the dressing room and got in the bath, he got his medal, and that cup was on the television. And I kept it there for 2 days, actually. And we just kept having a little look, because sometimes you feel, when you've achieved something, you get up the following morning, you think, well, I didn't dream it, did I? So you just poke your head in the lounge, and it's there on the television, and you think, no, you didn't dream it. But he came off, and he got arrested, and he got prosecuted, and all the usual normal procedure.
And the downside of it is that you, of course, had your affair with the fans after the Queen's Park Rangers.
Totally embarrassing affair that was, and out of order from my point of view. I clipped a couple of kids for running onto the pitch. And of course, Mr. Taylor now has made it illegal for anybody to go on the pitch.
Is that a thing you look back on now with regret? I mean, why the devil did I do it, you know? Or
no, the only thing I slipped up with over that is off at the end of a game and we all get home and all that type of thing. But he wanted a couple of shots of me shaking hands with Trevor Francis. And of course he kept his camera running, which all good people do. And caught that. It cost me £5,000 and banned from the touchline and bringing the game into disrepute. I was going to contest it, actually. And if, in another interview I did with you regarding Manchester United, if they'd have brought me up in front of the FA again, then I was really going to contest that one all the way, because I'm not sure this vague thing about bringing the game into disrepute, what it is. I don't know where the rules start and where they finish.
He's been over 25 years a manager, But a look at him shows that even after all these years, it's still a high-pressure job.
If you're not careful, you take your work home, and you take your frustrations home, and you take your disappointments home. That side of management is very hard to contain and to control. And if you don't contain it and control it, then you finish up losing your job in any case. Directors are not a very sympathetic lot in football, and they put an immense amount of pressure on you. Just with a sentence in a board meeting about why did you sign him? He can't play at all. And then you turn around and say, well, you sign the next bugger. If you're that clever, if you know that much whether he can play or not, you sign the next one. Then he comes back, of course, and says, well, it's your job. That's what you get paid for. And then I say, well, what's your job? What do you get out of football? And that type of thing. And you've got to be very careful. And then, of course, when you lose matches and when you get a frustration of having what we call a bad run in the game, you can take it home so easily and take it out of the wrong people. Yes. Barbara says to me repeatedly, I don't care what you do at the ground, she said, but when you come in the house, try and smile. And it's difficult when you lose. But she says, come in the house and try and smile.
More than 25 years a manager then, and every year at some point he says it's going to be his last. But when he does decide to go, it's not an exaggeration to say that the game of football will not be quite the same for many reasons. But does he seriously think about retirement?
The thing that worries me about retirement, and there's only one thing that worries me, is the fact that while I'm in work, I'm in what's called a closely knit club. You know, I can walk in a door and somebody will open it for me. I can go in the dressing room and nobody can come in, and I can do all that type of thing. Now, when I retire, I will have to sit in a stand or with directors and directors' wives, of course, who haven't got any idea about football whatsoever, and that's not a crime. That's why they are directors and directors' wives, because they know bugger all about the game. But to sit among that lot and listen to the chatter when I think I would want to concentrate on the game will be a very hard thing to bear. But it'll be my choice. I'll either have to do it or not come and watch a match. But I would like to see my son play occasionally when I've retired. Simple as that.
The Clough Roll of Honour, which starts with Derby County in 1969 with a Second Division Championship. In 1972, they were champions of the First Division. And then on to Nottingham Forest. Well, in one period in the late 1970s, they went 42 league games without defeat. They won the First Division Championship in 78, the European Cup in 79 and 80. And then the League Cup in 78, 79, 89 and 90. The Simod Cup in 1980.